Hey guys, Victor here. I recently invested another 100+ hours into min-maxing another Minion build, and this one in particular is a Pure Phys Skelemancer inspired by a guide I found by Viperesque, written back in Blight League. What I found inspiring about Viper's particular guide was its appeal to newer Path of Exile gamers, which was an audience that generally sought for builds with effective content progression, all the while retaining a low budget in terms of acquiring gear pieces. What I've been spending the past week working on was really fleshing out Viper's build, making a few tweaks here and there, and really pushing the idea of Pure Phys Skeleton shredding the Atlas to its limit. I'll also be putting out a step-by-step guide on how to gear up a budget version of this build in the future, and include steps on how to throw Exalt at the build and really push it to its absolute limits. But that's a whole nother post and video that will be left for another day. The topic that I wanted to discuss today was really a comparison between Zombiemancers and Skelemancer's, since I've spent roughly a week on each one, which totaled to about 100+ hours played on each build. Hopefully what I cover today will help new players decide on what build best suits what they're looking for when considering a summoner type build. So before I jump into comparing the two builds, I'll give kind of a brief summary on what each of these two builds encompass in terms of fundamentals and gear mechanics. The first build that I tested out was a Zombiemancer build by Brunowa. This was a build where I stuck strictly to Bruno's guide, as it was a very well thought out, well crafted build that takes advantage of some very niche mechanics in Path of Exile. The basic premise of this build is to stack strength on all your gear and passive tree nodes in order to take advantage of the unique item, the Baron, which allows you to boost your minions' damage as well as make your character tanky because of the increase to max life that results from stacking strength. Overall, this is a very well-rounded build that allows for most players to clear endgame content and experience Path of Exile from a summoner's perspective, with a unique spin to it. Get it? Now for the Skelemancer build that I based off of Viper's guide and began deviating into my own version of the build towards the mid to end game, this build is your classical take on what a summoner is normally perceived as in Path of Exile. You got your entourage of undead escorts to block incoming attacks and taunt off enemies that are too close to you, and your swarms of degenerated henchmen steamrolling your maps and shredding your atlas. This build is focused on acquiring traditional minion stats like minion damage and attack speed, and prioritizing gear that increases the level of your minions spells. By increasing the level of your minions beyond the usual level cap of 20, your minions' base damage increases substantially, thereby giving a massive boost to total damage output due to the scaling provided by your passive tree nodes and gear. The results of this build is a culmination of grinding, tweaking, and crafting that I've done and will talk about in greater detail in a later video. And now, it is time for the comparison. The first aspect that I want to compare in this video is Minion AI. For most summoner builds, minions summoned usually have an AI program that makes them behave similar to mobs encountered throughout Raid class. If an enemy comes within range of the minion will attack the enemy. Their attack patterns can be improved by way of increasing their general action speed or linking support gems that can alter their AI to be defensive or aggressive. The main differences between zombie AI and skeleton AI can be traced to the fact that skeletons are temporary minions that expire after a certain duration, and zombies are more permanent minions that don't need to be resummoned. Because of this, zombies are programmed to follow the summoner if the summoner moves a certain distance away from them, and will cease combat in order to do so. Whereas skeletons can be spawned into combat and will attack enemies at a much greater distance from the summoner. Since Zombiemancers rely on zombies to deal damage, they are subject to lower clear speeds or clear speeds that are more limited by the character's movement speed than Skelemancers. The next comparison that I wanted to talk about is survivability. And in many cases in Path of Exile, a good offense can oftentimes be your best defense. This runs along the lines of, if you kill your enemies quick enough, there won't be much damage output for you to be tanking in the first place. Now if we take offense out of the equation completely, Zombiemancers are by far the tankier choice over Skelemancer's, simply because of their OP strength stacking mechanic, which can be taken advantage of even further by using a Geoffrey's Sanctuary to also increase max energy shield based on strength. Although Zombiemancers are tankier under a pure defense-oriented perspective, players must also take into account the range at which skeletons can clear mobs away from the player, which supports the idea of a good offense manifesting into an effective defense. Since skeletons can clear at a greater range, Skelemancers are able to stand at a safer distance from danger in addition to having Convocation, to recall their zombies and specters to intercept any projectiles. So when comparing the two builds from a survivability standpoint, it's important to consider whether you would like to survive by simply being tankier or by encountering fewer dangerous situations. Finally, the last point of comparison that I wanted to make in regards to these two builds is versatility versus simplicity. The strength stacking Zombiemancer allows for wiggle room to fit in projectile-type specters, raging spirits, and skeletons as well, which all benefit from strength when the Baron is equipped. This creates a level of versatility and allows for immense playstyle adjustments when tweaking with the Zombiemancer build, which is often appealing to players who have experience in theory crafting or just want to change things up with the same build every once in a while. As for the Pure Phys Skelemancer, simplicity is the name of the game. There are no auras, no damage conversions, no animate guardian, no timeless jewels, no cluster jewels, and no weird path of building trickery as Viper put it. Just pure physical damage, and lots of it. The Skelemancer build I am developing and trying to push to god tier levels has a very linear gear progression, and a very singular playstyle. Summon skellies, put up an offering, and watch your enemies die. So that's all I have for today with comparing the two summoner builds. I hope that this video has shed some light on the different types of summoner builds that can be crafted and has helped anyone who may be considering a summoner build in the future. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, don't forget to check out the next episode whenever I post it, which will probably be the guide on my Skelemancer build. See ya.